Hello. My name is Virginia Bode, and this is videobeaux. This is the steel wash program mode. The source video will have a blue hue applied. Blue hues often evoke feelings of calmness, sadness, or detachment. I hope you enjoy it. Try it out today.
It's like we are in a convertible with Thelma and Louise speeding toward a cliff, and the cliff is out there, but it just seems distant enough that we don't recognize it. So we're in that speeding convertible, and right now we're retuning the radio, and we're slowing down a little bit, but we haven't really changed our direction. And Paul Ehrlich, one of the biologists I've interviewed, he says, all we're doing is delaying collapse by a few weeks or a few months, maybe.
This is Peak Moment. We are living at a peak of human innovation, information, wealth, and health. But we're also at a peak of population and consumption, with rising temperatures and declining resources fueled by cheap oil and gas. Peak Moment Television, bringing you examples of positive responses to energy decline and climate change through local community action.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. I'm sitting at the edge of the Oroville Reservoir in Northern California along the west slope of the Sierra, not far from where we live. And my guest came all the way west to visit with us. This is Dave Gardner, who's a filmmaker and director of Hooked on Growth. Hooked on Growth. Sounds like here's where we are. Dave, tell us about the film.
Well, Hooked on Growth is a nonprofit documentary, feature-length documentary that should be out early in 2011 with a little luck. I've been working on it for a long time, but we're approaching the completion point. And in a nutshell, we are seeking the cure for growth addiction. The film Hooked on Growth takes a look at our modern society and asks, why are we behaving irrationally? When you think about it, if you look in the news, it's not hard to see overwhelming evidence that we are hitting the limits to growth today. We're looking at species extinction, climate change, peak oil, toxins in our water supply, freshwater shortages, and we can't even feed everyone on the planet. And I wondered to myself, why is it that we have all this evidence and yet we continue to seek economic growth, and we continue to actually, cities today still compete for population growth. So why? Why? So this film asks that question, why? What is it that makes us behave so irrationally?
What are you finding about that?
It's been interesting, and I'm not sure I've completely found all the answers.
Well, give us some clues, or some of the people that you've met, what are you finding out?
Well, a lot of it, I think, is related to mythology. It's related to the stories we tell, that we have this cultural imperative of growth, and really we've just developed it recently in human history. We're on the tail end of a 300-year growth binge, and that's all we remember. For most of us, that's all we know. We don't really realize that for most of the history of humankind, we weren't on a growth binge. We weren't busy coming up with technological advances and increasing our population and growing our economies for most of human history.
So you're thinking even the civilizations, we were just trying to sort of inch our way up a little bit. Because population certainly grew in the last 5,000 years.
But very little, really, relatively. Yeah.
And suddenly, what shifted 300 years ago?
Well, technology finally came to our rescue. Basically, fossil fuels has been the big thing.
Energy. So we have energy to feed all of that.
So all of a sudden, we discovered how to harness the power of coal and oil, and we are burning through that. We're burning through millions of years of stored energy from sunlight in a very short time. And we think that's normal, and we think we can do it forever. And so we've gotten hooked. We've gotten hooked on growth, and now we've come to believe that expanding economies and growing populations is situation normal, and that it's actually necessary, essential for human happiness.
Well, the economic system requires growth, right, of more money to pay interest and so on.
Unfortunately, yes. But it's impossible. Perpetual growth is not possible, and I think most of us deep down inside we know that. But The whole system is set for that, and so it's challenging and in fact even painful to get out of that system. So that's really part of the film. I want to hold up a mirror so we can see what we're doing and see how kind of loony it is. I'm kind of splashing cold water in our face to wake us up from the American dream, because the American dream is about to become a nightmare.
How so?
Well,
what do you picture?
Well, business as usual, if we continue business as usual, it's going to be pretty ugly. The end of growth is here. We can't stop it. So the real question is, we can either embrace it and coast down to a smooth landing and have a peaceful shift out of that growth paradigm and really rediscover happiness and what life is really all about, or we can fight it. And we're fighting it today. You know, politicians around the world are trying to figure out how to restore growth, restore economic growth.
Sure.
And we can't. We might be able to briefly restore it, but if we continue to fight that, we're going to waste a lot of energy, a lot of resources trying to do something that we cannot do. And it'll be, chances are that the result of that will be much greater numbers of people starving, a lot more social conflict as people fight over the remaining resources.
But you know, you said mythology. It's like, it's almost a sense of we're entitled to more, better, bigger in this culture, in Western culture. And now that we have Hollywood, of course, we've got all the rest of the cultures that have at least the ability to plug in saying, I want that too. China, Brazil, India. It seems to me like a runaway, is it like a runaway, you know, illusion, but it's still runaway? Do you see anything halting it other than natural forces?
We are on it's like we are in a convertible with Thelma and Louise speeding toward a cliff, you know, and the cliff is out there, but it just seems distant enough that we don't recognize it. And another good analogy would be we're like frogs in water that's gradually being heated to a boil, but it's happening slowly enough. It's called shifting baselines. It's happening just slowly enough that we don't recognize it. If the average temperature is increasing, you know, a degree a decade, you don't really notice that. Boy,
right.
if it went up 5 degrees next year, it would get our attention. Plus, like in places like where we are in the United States, there is food on the grocery store shelves. Okay, the people who are starving and dying today, we don't see them.
That's true.
So it's right now it's in distant lands, or it's temporally distant, and so that keeps us from doing what we need to do. So we're in that speeding convertible, and right now we're retuning the radio, and we're slowing down a little bit, but we haven't really changed our direction. And Paul Ehrlich, one of the biologists one of the biologists I've interviewed, he says, you know, all we're doing is delaying collapse by a few weeks or a few months, maybe.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. It's that sort of inevitable, is what he's saying. There's a brick wall sitting here.
If we don't make major changes. I mean, we really need a major paradigm shift.
So do you try and address that, or do any of your guests try and address that for the film? How do you get that kind of paradigm shift? Hopefully voluntarily, I'm guessing.
Hopefully. I think that's the only way to do it. But it's tricky, and I'm making the film because I am optimistic. I'm hopeful, but I couldn't have picked a tougher subject. There is not a harder thing to change in the world than to get us out of our growth addiction and into a recovery program. The best I can hope for is that, and I believe this will happen. I believe that the people who are really ready for the message, who are really know that they're not happy with the system that's happening now, those people, after they watch the film, will walk out feeling really energized and motivated about increasing their efforts to get out of the system. They'll feel like there's more people recognizing it, and they'll pick up their efforts. But there's a huge mainstream audience out there who today this is just completely a foreign idea, and they will walk out of the film, probably a lot of them will walk out of the film thinking, what a bunch of gobbledygook. I don't buy that for a minute. But even if they do, I don't believe they'll ever read a headline quite the same. They'll never you know, we right now we're drinking the Kool-Aid. Every news report, every headline, every broadcaster really celebrates growth. And I think even the people who walk out of the film saying, I don't buy it, they will never read that headline quite the same. They'll start on the right path.
So you're hoping to just seed some inkling for other people, some niggling voice, if you will, to say, so they don't see it the same. Because the media is not helping us tell this story.
No.
The politicians are not.
But hopefully, hopefully there will be editors and reporters and other journalists who will see the film, or they'll see conversations about the film, and they will. It'll just be a little bit of a chip in that pedestal that we've put growth on. And it's not going to be it's not going to be easy to knock growth off the pedestal, but we've got to chip away at it.
It's got everything going for it, right? It's glamorous. You want to have, all of the media says this is the way to live, right? So I'm wondering whether you're trying to depict any of the benefits of stepping off that path. Are you trying to?
Totally, because really growth doesn't have everything going for it. It turns out, and this is part of the journey that I've made. I didn't recognize this when I started working on the film, but I've come to be educated and to recognize that, wow, this is really good news that we're about to step off of that hamster wheel of growth, because we aren't getting what we really want out of life. Remember, it's a cliche, but no one ever said on their deathbed, boy, I wish I'd spent more time at the office. I wish I'd made more money.
Yes. Okay.
No, it's I wish I knew my kids better. I wish I'd spent more time with the people I love. I wish I'd fished more. I wish I'd hiked more. And so the good news is that if we can recognize it soon enough, we can step off that hamster wheel and slow down that runaway convertible or train or whatever you want to call it. And guess what? It's going to be great news, because we're going to enjoy life and get back in touch with what should have been the American dream all along.
You remind me of the surveys that have been done over the last several decades of a happiness index. I don't know if it comes into your film, but then tell us about it, the happiness index.
Well, you may be able to tell us more than I can at this point, but it's definitely going to be in the film. That all of the surveys and the studies and the data indicate that the era of growth hasn't increased our happiness.
Right.
We happiness peaked decades ago, and the studies show that happiness, once your basic needs are met financially, further accumulation of financial wealth doesn't contribute to your happiness. And so what happens, for me personally, I lived it. I was just telling Jason in the car the other day, Jason's helping me on the shoot out here on the West Coast. I was explaining to him how there was a day when I was driving down the freeway, talking on the cell phone, recording notes for my secretary, reading a book, and I thought, wow, I am so busy. I have arrived. I'm successful. This is it. And you know what? I was killing myself. I was getting ulcers, and I was not enjoying life. But I didn't realize it, because I had bought into the new American dream that advertising and just keeping up with the Joneses puts you into. Fortunately, I eventually figured that out.
And stepped off the hamster wheel, or partway off the hamster wheel yourself?
I have, yeah. I'm not struggling to make a house payment on a 4,000 square foot house and have 3 cars in the garage and vacations in Cabo 3 times a year. And a lot of that might sound fun, but what's more fun is to know your kids and to stop and smell the roses.
So Dave, get back to your film for a second. Who have you contacted? What kinds of things have you filmed? You're on a trip right now. Tell us a little bit about what we might get to see if you put it in the film.
Well, you know what? The genesis of this particular trip was a degrowth conference in Vancouver, Canada. And there have been very few of these conferences, but they're starting to pop up. There was one in Barcelona, Spain, a month or 2 ago. And it's one of the things that gives me hope. There are people coming together and starting to try to figure out what does a stable or even a slightly contracting economy look like, and how do we get there? How do we get there without inflicting too much pain? Because, as you know, when an addict crashes, it's painful. That doesn't mean that they need to get another hit of the addictive drug. That's not the solution.
Okay.
But they do need to go through withdrawal and they're going to feel some pain. So I went up to Vancouver first, and one of the first things I did was an interview with Bill Reese, who is really one of the fathers of ecological footprint analysis.
What's an ecological footprint?
Oh gosh, you'll have to see
just in one sentence.
You'll have to watch Hooked on Growth to find out. But
We will.
basically, ecological footprint is how much of the usable land on Earth is required to meet the needs of a population, of a person. You can have an ecological footprint, or the population of a city can have an ecological footprint, or a nation. It's a way to kind of calculate whether we're using more of the Earth's resources than are really available to us or not, and whether we're living sustainably. And the current thinking from scientists out there is that we're using anywhere from 30 to 40% more of the Earth's resources than is sustainable. Now we can get by with that temporarily, but what that means is
borrowing it from the future?
Yeah, we're liquidating the planet of its resources,
Okay.
so we can't do that forever.
Who else have you chatted with?
I had a real interesting conversation with the senior editor of Grist magazine in Seattle, Lisa Hymas, who has written boldly about her choice to be child-free, to not have children, because I've talked a lot about economic growth, but also population growth is a part of the subject. And that's something I hope to explain well in the film, is that, population and consumption multiply each other. And so if you have a lot of population, you have to have a whole lot less consumption to come up with a sustainable balance.
Okay.
If you have a lot of consumption, then you have to have a much smaller population.
Right.
So we're in so much trouble. We're in overshoot to such a degree today, that we've got to be working on both. And I'm not, personally, I'm not out there promoting population control, but I'd like every couple in the world to at least know the implications of their decisions about family size when they're making those choices.
See, we won't go very far in this, but that strikes me as one of the most tricky topics of all. I mean, you've got millions of years human history, of having enough people to keep the tribe together and scarcity or whatever, and religious, and a lot of beliefs that that has to go counter to.
Totally.
So.
And I guess it's the rebel in me that makes me, that attracts me to that kind of subject. Why is it's become such a taboo to talk about it? And people make a lot of assumptions about your motives. They make a lot of assumptions about what your solutions are before you ever even open your mouth with them.
Sure. You don't want to do population first moment. You said population control and I don't get a choice and all kinds of.
Yeah, and so I want to explore that. I'm not necessarily going to offer a prescription, but I think the more we talk about it, the more open we are about it, we take away the power of the taboo to keep us from acting rationally.
Good. Do that, because I feel like we need to take some of these stones that are revered and sacred. We need to take sacred and just turn them over and examine what's underneath them and see if they still fit us, fit life where they are now. It's a good one to do.
Well put. Well put.
So who else will we meet?
Well, let's see. In a couple days, I'll be talking with Jerry Mander, who is a couple things he's done that's interesting. Is he early on recognized the power of advertising and what we were doing to ourselves. That we were setting up this keeping up with the Joneses mentality. We were finding ways to make ourselves unhappy with what we have and to get us on this treadmill where we're constantly seeking more material items in a quest for happiness. So I'm hoping he can kind of shed a little bit of light on that and how that came to pass. But he's also been big in the globalization movement. So it turns out that globalization is working against us for a number of reasons, one of which is it allows us to export our ecological footprint so far away that we don't see the damage we're doing.
So over in China, they have the waste, and so on that we are avoiding here? Is that the kind of thing?
In fact, one of the things I hope to do in the film is we're planning a kind of a humorous vignette where, imagine a family where they're stuck with their yard. All of their impacts never leave. And imagine how differently you would behave if all of your resources had to come from that spot, that plot of land, and if all of your waste had to stay in that plot of land. And so as we relocalize our food supply and our economies, it's actually going to make it easier for us to behave sustainably because we'll be able to see it. We'll see our impact.
Yeah. Yeah. You may not try and cover this in your film, but I'm curious to know your own personal sense of sort of what time frame are you thinking about for that we're not going to be able to nest? You know, yeah. Do you have a personal gut sense of that, or?
Let's see, boy, I think we've got a couple hours here. It's close. you know, I certainly ask a lot of the scientists, and they have a lot of debates about that. But one of the things I'm learning is that it can be very nonlinear. You've probably heard of the hockey stick. If you look, there's a lot of graphs where you look at our like our population, and the growth of the population didn't increase very much, and then all of a sudden, boom, up like that, and that tends to parallel economic growth and a lot of our negative environmental impacts, and it's a function of exponential growth.
And that tip up, that turn up happens, if I remember right, sort of close to around the time we found oil. Fairly close.
Yeah.
The beginning of the 20th century, for sure.
Yeah. So when the change happens, it can start changing really fast. So even though life seems pretty normal today, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it wouldn't shock me if our lives are really different. It could be we have 20 years. Nobody knows for sure. But I think it's close. I think in our lifetimes, we're going to see a huge shift, and it's going to be forced on us if we don't wise up and watch Hooked on Growth and get religion and change the way we live.
Well, obviously, in a film like this, you could stop at, here's the addiction. Here's what's not working. And part of why I've been pushing you about picturing, well, what's the alternative, is because I think many people have found that it could be just depressing to watch another documentary that shows another environmental disaster in the making, right? Garbage patches and toxic spills and so on. And here we are watching an oil leak from the Gulf as we speak. One of those that we'll look back probably is an incredible disaster. But that doesn't tend to motivate people to change their lives, they find. Part of what we need is a carrot. I realize we're going to have a lot of, from what you're saying and others are saying, we're going to have a lot pushing us from behind, says you've got to. Are you going to try and give us any notion of carrots?
Well, I hope to. I really feel like, it's going to take a lot of film to really get people the lay of the land. So I struggle with the time issue, and I certainly intend to do a series of films under the Growth Busters super title, I guess you could call it.
Growth Busters?
Yes.
Growth Busters.
Growth Busters.
Oh, man. And so your website?
Yeah, that's why our website's growthbusters.org. That's a public education project, and it'll be a series of films delving into these kind of subjects. So we may have to wait for the sequel to really get into a lot of the alternatives. But
I'll hold you to it.
Okay, that's good. But there are alternatives, and we hope to spend a little bit of time profiling the transition movement, which I think is a really excellent way, and I don't have time to really go into that, but look for that.
We've tapped on that one.
Also, Awakening the Dreamer. I'm really impressed with this series of symposia that Awakening the Dreamer is doing, where they're basically saying, wow, we're pursuing a dream that is a false dream, and we need to wake up and get back in touch with the dream that really will fulfill us and make us happy. But another thing is that, and this is unique about my film, there's certainly been other films about the end of empire and economic growth and peak oil and unsustainability. But one of the things I hope to do in my film is show people how what we're doing at the community level really makes a huge difference. We can't have a sustainable world if it's full of communities that have unsustainable goals of economic growth and population growth. And that's what we have today. So people can really make a difference, even if they can't elect a president who will stop chasing economic growth. They can elect a city council or run for city council and start to get their community unhooked from growth. That's a little bit easier to do.
We have only about 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes left. What haven't we covered?
Well, one interesting thing that I might share with you is that this isn't your typical film. Although maybe it's becoming more typical now to do films this way. This is a radical message that this film is carrying, and so it's been challenging, surprisingly challenging for me, to raise the money. It's a nonprofit project, and I thought I'd be able to get foundation grants and donations from people and find some philanthropists who would support it. But it's been a lot harder than I thought. So basically, I've burned through what money I had, and I've had to find a way to still make the film. So it's a crowd-produced and a crowd-funded, and it will be a crowd-distributed film. We're using volunteers, volunteer man and woman power, and I have a support network from around the world. I have people in Ethiopia, Belgium, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, all across the world who are helping us do research. They're helping us spread the word. They're contributing what money they can. And when we release the film, we're really going to need their help. So I'm really trying to encourage people to visit www.growthbusters.org and get on our email list, become a fan on our Facebook page, do something so that we can communicate with the people and get their help today. We need their help today, but we definitely need their help when the film is released to organize community screenings, house parties.
That's you're going to basically have it out sort of in DVD so that people can just show it.
Yep.
So your goal here is you are not going to make, we know you're not going to make a fortune on this, but to get the message out more widely.
Totally.
That's it.
Yep.
That's right. That's the right thing to be doing. Whoa. You're a man on a mission.
Crazy.
How does it feel?
It feels good. It feels good. I feel like I am sometimes a pariah, and there's been times when I even had a little bit of an inferiority complex because I was almost embarrassed by what I was doing. I knew it was right, but the rest of the world can think you're loony.
Absolutely, yes.
But that's changing.
Yes.
I see that changing.
That's exciting. You know, you're working from the grassroots. A crowd-produced film, if you will, and distributed is the grassroots rising. And I think that's part of what I hear in Paul Hawkins' message is that there are a lot of grassroots people who care deeply, and of course that's who we get to meet in Peak Moment too.
Yeah. So I need all the help I can get. I need people who will help me with publicity and promotion, and I need people who want to come to Colorado this summer and act in our humorous vignettes, and it's
There's
a
your
blast.
call. Go to Colorado this summer with Ghostbusters.
Yep. Give me a call, send me an email, and we'll find a place for you to stay and make you a star.
Dave, thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I wish you, of course, I mean, I'm cheering you on, because getting to or exposing the core beliefs that we have is tough. And we need to chip away at it every way we can, and thank you for doing it.
Thanks for your part.
Thank you so much. You're watching Peak Moment, locally reliant living for challenging times, and my guest Dave Gardner is doing a film on hooked on growth so that we can get unhooked from growth. Watch us next time.